The United States of America is the fourth largest and third most populous country in the world, with the continental US covering roughly the same size as Europe. Climates in the US range from tropical in southern Florida to the Arctic Circle in Alaska, and from rainy swamps in Louisiana to the dry Sonoran Desert in Arizona. With this massive area, population, and diversity of geography, different regions and cultures are bound to be created. The idea of regional identities in the United States comes from the very earliest days of the nation. The original 13 colonies were divided into New England, the Middle, and the South colonies. New England colonies were colder and religiously congregationalist, focused on fishing and trade. The Middle colonies were more populous and diverse, and were where industry first took hold. The Southern colonies were religiously Anglican and focused on agriculture driven by slave labor. These divisions of religion, ancestry, economy, and geography are how regional identities are formed. For me personally, some of the earliest maps that got me interested in geography covered the regional differences in the United States. As a kid, I had this one National Geographic book that divided the US into 5 regions: the Northeast, Southeast, Midwest, Southwest, and West. Over time, I learned how these regions define the country through living in the cornfields of the Midwest, visiting the mountains of the West, and eating the barbecue of the South. I also watched videos where people made their own maps breaking down the US into regions. This led me to make this map, where I divide the continental US into 4 main regions and 31 subregions. I want to make a series where I explain each region and its subregions in depth. This will include 5 videos, one for the Northeast, the South, Midwest, West, and a video covering Alaska, Hawaii, the territories, and native reservations. Firstly, I want to mention how this map is based on many different factors, but at the end of the day, it comes down to my opinion, which you have every right to disagree with. Also, I don't want to downplay state loyalties, where many people identify more with their state than any one of the subregions I mentioned here. Each major region is based on what I consider the general consensus of Americans. If people talk about the East Coast or the Northeast, it is likely they are talking about the Northeast megalopolis stretching from DC to Boston, or the forests of New England. If they talk about the South, they are likely talking about regions with the Southern drawl, or states that used to be part of the Confederacy. If they talk about the Midwest, they are likely referencing cornfields or plains stretching to the horizon. And if they are talking about the West, they probably mean regions with high mountain, deserts, or the densely populated West Coast. Subregions, on the other hand, are each based off aspects that give a region a unique identity. I would group these aspects into 2 categories: geographical and cultural. Geographical aspects include elevation, rainfall, temperature, and climate type, while cultural aspects include ancestry, religion, population density, economy, and cultural practices. In this video, I want to dive into the Northeast and its 6 subregions of Northern New England, Southern New England, Dublin Northeast, New York City Metro, Philadelphia Metro, and Chesapeake Bay. The Northeast as a whole is defined by its dense coastal population centers. This region holds 4 of the 10 largest urban areas of the United States in New York City, Washington, D.C., Boston, and Philadelphia. These urban areas, along with other smaller cities, form the Northeast megalopolis, which covers most of the region's coast and is the most densely populated area in the country. This area contains a majority of the region's population and economy. In inland regions are the Adirondack, Green, and White Mountains, along with numerous forests encompassing a large amount of the region's area, but little of its population and economy. The Northeast region has large amounts of English, Irish, and Italian ancestry, and holds a large percentage of Catholics compared to the rest of the country. As a total, the region holds a population of 61,442,000, or about 18% of the US total population. It also contains an area of 148,637 square miles, giving it a population density of 413 people per square mile, which is the highest of any of the regions. It has a GDP of 5.67 trillion and a GDP per capita of around 92,000, which is the highest out of any region. The region is divided into 6 subregions: the 4 coastal dense regions of southern New England, New York Metro, Philadelphia Metro, and Chesapeake Bay, and the more sparse regions of northern New England and the upland Northeast. The subregion of northern New England is one of the 2 halves of a larger subregion of New England. Even though New England is a classic subregion of the US that even has its own flag, there are really 2 distinct parts. Southern New England is a dense subregion based around the Boston urban area, but the north is a sparsely populated region dominated by the rocky coastline and famous inland forests. Northern New England fully encompasses the states of Maine, New Hampshire, and Vermont. This subregion has a population of 3.38 million and an area of 49,139 square miles. This comes out to a population density of 69 people per square mile, which is under the national average and substantially under the rest of the region. The subregion has an economy of 251.6 billion and a GDP per capita of 74,138, which is lower than the rest of the region, but the cost of living is lower than much of the Northeast. Much of northern New England is covered by the New England Acadian forests. These forests cover the White and Green Mountains that also cover much of the subregion. Many of these forests are coniferous, but the lower altitude regions are covered in deciduous trees that create the famous fall scenes of northern New England. Near the coast, the forests hold less conifers and become oak forest, which is the ecosystem of the famous Acadia National Park. Near the coast, few large animals are found, but in the mountains and hills, animals like black bears, moose, and wolves can be found. The coastal regions are also known for their rocky faces covered in barnacles and the kelp forests that have been hit heavy by human involvement. These waters are famous for their lobsters and crabs that define New England cuisine. Unlike southern New England, the north is sparsely populated with no metro regions over 1 million population. Its 2 largest cities are Portland on the coast of Maine, with a population of 578,000, and Manchester in southern New Hampshire, with a population of 433,000. For this series, I use the citypopulation.de major agglomerations of the world for any urban area over 1 million population. These urban areas include any continuously built up region in a certain city's population. For any cities under 1 million population, I will use the system of American metropolitan areas. These areas usually include more rural areas, and I will only include them if they aren't also a part of a different urban area. Of course, much of northern New England has English ancestry, and most people have one or more ancestors that arrived in the United States before its independence. The subregion also has one of the largest amounts of French ancestry from French settlers in Quebec, and the general region with all 3 states having around 10% French ancestry. Overall, northern New England has one of the highest percentages of white racial identification of anywhere in the US. Religiously, most of northern New England is split between Catholics and evangelical Protestants, but also has some of the highest rates of irreligiosity in the country. There is a small cultural divide between the coastal and inland cultures. The coast is famous for its seafood and maritime culture, while inland regions have a large amount of dairy production and are famous for their maple syrup. In general, northern New Englanders are the closest you can get to Canadians while still being in America. There are no major sports teams in northern New England. Northern New England is generally much more rural than the rest of the Northeast and has a lower average income than the rest of the region. A large part of the economy is based around tourism for the natural beauty of the subregion. Logging and papermaking were historically important to the economy, but much of the region was deforested, which with environmental concerns has diminished the sector. Inland also has a small agricultural sector, mostly based around dairy, and the coast has a fishing and crabbing focus. Southern New England is a dense half of the New England region, with the massive city of Boston dominating the subregion. Southern New England contains the full states of Massachusetts and Rhode Island, as well as most of Connecticut, except for the regions which are part of the New York urban area. This subregion contains some important historical sites for the country and is where the American Revolution began. Southern New England has a population of 9,903,000 and an area of 12,090 square miles. This gives the subregion a population density of 819, which is nearly 12 times as dense as northern New England. It has a GDP of 957.5 billion and a GDP per capita of 96.68 thousand, which is substantially higher than the north and one of the highest in the country. Compared to northern New England, the south has much less nature. It is mostly covered by coastal forests similar to the north, which are also famous for their variety of colors in the fall. The Cape Cod Peninsula is covered in coastal pine barrens, which are the least densely populated areas in the subregion. Similarly to the north, southern New England has a large amount of coastal biodiversity, but does not have kelp forest like the north. What southern New England lacks in natural beauty, it makes up for in its cities and their historical significance. By far the largest and most important city in the subregion is Boston, which is the sixth most populous urban area in the United States and holds a population of 7.85 million. By my metrics, this urban area actually includes Providence, which means it includes all of Rhode Island and much of eastern Massachusetts. The vast majority of the population of the subregion resides within this urban area. Boston is arguably the most important city in early American history, with the Boston Massacre occurring there and the battles of Lexington and Concord occurring nearby. Boston is also famous for its density of higher education, with colleges like Harvard, MIT, and Boston College all being in the metro area. The only other urban area in southern New England is Hartford in central Connecticut, with an urban area population of 1.71 million. Hartford is known as the insurance capital of the world and has been a center for the industry since the 1800s. Southern New England also has large amounts of colonial English ancestry, but is more influenced by later waves of immigration. Much of the population has Irish or Italian ancestry, and even some Portuguese. Of course, with large urban areas, much diversity can also be found. Culture is much more based around urban and suburban identities than the rural and coastal culture of the North. Of course, the Boston accent is one of the most famous accents in the US, and similarly to the North, the cuisine is largely based on seafood, with more Italian influence the closer you get to New York City. Boston is home to the Patriots, Celtics, and Red Sox. For any sports, I'm only going to include football, basketball, and baseball, always in that order. The economy of southern New England is one of the strongest and most diversified of anywhere in the US, and is of course almost fully concentrated in its massive urban areas. Boston's economy contains a large amount of higher education, biotechnology, finance, and healthcare, and as mentioned earlier, Hartford is known for its large amount of insurance. Boston also has a large amount of tourism, and the region is boosted by its large student population. The New York urban area subregion encompasses America's most important urban area. For basically all of American history, New York City has been the most populous and important city in the nation. The subregion has a population of 22.6 million and covers an area of 8,724 miles squared. This comes out to a population density of 2,590, which makes it the most densely populated subregion in the entire country, with over 26 times the national average. The city is also one of the most economically productive regions in the country, and even the entire world, with a GDP of 2.327 trillion and a GDP per capita of 103,000. Of course, the subregion also has one of the highest costs of living in the US. In general, the New York urban area is much more defined by the human landscape than the natural landscape. Most of the region is developed, except for certain regions of New Jersey and Orange County, which are mostly covered by coastal forests similar to New England. The more south you get in New Jersey, the more the environment becomes pine barrens, which is the least developed area shared between the New York and Philadelphia urban areas. Almost the entire population of this subregion is contained within the New York urban area, which has a population of 22.6 million. This urban area includes all of Long Island, the 5 boroughs in southern New York, Bridgeport and New Haven in Connecticut, and Newark and much of the Jersey Shore in New Jersey. The most densely populated and economically productive areas of the subregion are in the 5 boroughs, and specifically Manhattan Island. Manhattan and New York are home to some of America's most famous locations, such as Times Square, Central Park, the Empire State Building, and the Statue of Liberty. Manhattan is also famous for Wall Street, which is the beating heart of the American and wider world economy, as it is the largest stock exchange on Earth. New York culture is important as it affects the entirety of American culture, with many celebrities, music, and fashion originating from the urban area. Ethnically, the subregion is probably the most diverse in the US and is one of the most ethnically diverse cities in the world, with communities from almost every country. The largest ancestry group for most of the region is Italian, but some of the boroughs of New York have larger African American or Puerto Rican ancestry. Many groups of people live in their own communities in the New York urban area, creating vastly different cultural landscapes depending on where in the city you are. In the urban area, the most common religion is Catholicism, but there are also large Protestant, Jewish, and Muslim communities. The urban area is known for its Italian food, with especially New York-style pizza being a hallmark of the city. New York, like Boston, has its own famous accent, and its people are somewhat known for being cold and less friendly than other parts of the country. New York is home to the Giants, Jets, Yankees, Mets, Nets, and Knicks. The economy of the New York urban area is massive and extremely diversified. The center of the economy is the finance sector, as New York holds the New York Stock Exchange, NASDAQ, and the headquarters of many influential banks, as well as many hedge funds and insurance companies. Along with being the finance capital of the world, New York is a media giant, which is home to NBC, CBS, Fox News, the New York Times, and the Wall Street Journal. New York also has a large amount of about every tertiary sector imaginable. The New York economy also shows a massive disparity between the billionaires living in downtown Manhattan to impoverished people living in housing projects in the Bronx. These economic disparities heavily affect the entire urban area. The Philadelphia urban area is very similar to its East Coast partners of New York and Boston, being the 7th most populous urban area in the country, as well as being historically important. The subregion has a population of 9,520,000 and an area of 11,318 square miles, giving it a population density of 841. This is very high, but lower than New York, because the subregion contains a larger percentage of rural area. Philly has a GDP of 881.8 billion and a GDP per capita of 92.62 thousand, which is like much of the Northeast and is on the higher end of the country. Philadelphia was very important in the creation of the nation, as it was the country's first capital and is home to the Liberty Bell. Similarly to New York, much of the Philadelphia subregion is developed, but it does have slightly more undeveloped land. Much of the region is a continuation of the northeast Atlantic boreal forests, but the subregion also contains much of the New Jersey pine barrens. In addition to these biomes, the very edge of the Appalachians Blue Ridge forests have a higher level of biodiversity run through the region. The southern extent of the subregion also reaches the mouth of the Delaware River and Chesapeake Bay, giving it a maritime culture to the urban area, even though the main state of Pennsylvania does not border the ocean. Of course, the majority of the subregion's population lives in the Philadelphia metro area, but not all, as like New York. The Philadelphia urban area has a population of 7.65 million, making it the seventh largest urban area in the country. The urban area covers Trenton in New Jersey and surrounding suburbs, as well as Allentown to the north and Wilmington, Delaware to the south. Philly is known for its importance in American history, as it is where the Declaration of Independence and Constitution were signed, as well as being the original American capital. Also in the subregion is the nearby metro area of Reading, which is not included in the Philly urban area and has a population of 440,000. Reading is known for making 1/3 of America's pretzels and giving its name to the Reading Railroad. The Philly subregion is a continuation of the wider northeast coastal urban culture known for people who are constantly busy. Ethnically, the region has less Italian descendants than further north, and instead has a higher amount of Irish and African ancestry. In the rural areas that the subregion stretches into, the majority of people identify with German ancestry. Religiously, the urban area is split between Catholics and Protestants, with a decent-sized Jewish community. The rural regions are largely Protestant. Philadelphia is famous for its cheesesteaks, with the King of Steaks and Geno's Steaks being the most famous cheesesteak restaurants. It is also known for its murals and street art. Philadelphia is home to the Eagles, 76ers, and the Phillies. Like all East Coast urban areas, the economy is widely diversified, but has its specific interests. For Philly, a large amount of the economy is based on higher education and medicine, with a specific focus on pharmaceutics and biotechnology. The city also has a large finance and insurance sector. Philly has an important port and serves as a transport hub between DC and New York. The Chesapeake Bay subregion includes the areas around one of America's most important waterways and boasts the nation's capital, which also doubles as the nation's fourth largest metro area. The subregion covers parts of the states of Delaware, Maryland, and Virginia, as well as the District of Columbia, or American Capital Territory. It has a population of 10,685,000, making it the second most populated subregion in the Northeast. The subregion has an area of 15,216 miles squared, which gives it a population density of 702, which is still over 7 times the national average. It has a GDP of $941.2 billion and a GDP per capita of 88,000, which is the lowest of the densely populated coastal Northeast metro areas. The natural landscape of the Chesapeake Bay region is largely based around, well, the bay. The Chesapeake Bay is an estuary, which means it is a mix of fresh water from the rivers that flow into it and salt water from the Atlantic Ocean, giving it brackish water. The bay has a large amount of biodiversity and is known for its blue crabs, underwater grasses, and oysters. But from urban and agricultural runoff, many areas of the bay have become dead zones in recent years. For land habitats, in the east of the subregion lies the Delmarva Peninsula, which is covered in a biome called the Middle Atlantic Coastal Forests. These forests consist of hickory, oak, and pine trees, usually on sandy soils, and they are known for frequent fires. On the other side of the bay lies the southeastern mixed forests, which are similar but have more solid soil. These forests also occur at higher elevation than the coastal forests. As with other dense eastern regions, much of the natural habitat has been destroyed for development. The major urban area in the Chesapeake Bay subregion is the Washington, D.C. urban area, which includes Baltimore on the coast in Maryland and Arlington across the Potomac in Virginia. This urban area has a population of 8.8 million and is, of course, home to the capital of the United States. With this position comes all the monuments, such as the National Mall, Capitol Building, White House, Washington, Jefferson, and Lincoln monuments. The Baltimore part of the urban area is known for its maritime culture and famous accent. But even with the marble pillars, the urban area, and especially Baltimore, do have large amounts of poverty. The other major urban area in the subregion is Virginia Beach, which is located at the very south of the subregion and is home to 1.66 million people. Virginia Beach is of course known for its beaches, which bring a lot of tourism and has a large military presence. Much of the Chesapeake Bay subregion, and especially the urban areas, have large amounts of African American ancestry, but certain rural regions have more English, Irish, or especially German ancestry. Religiously, much of the region is Protestant, with many evangelical Protestants in rural region, and urban areas having more mainline and historically black Protestants, as well as more Catholic, Jewish, and Muslim communities. The culture of the region is split between the urban areas, which are similar to the rest of the major northeastern cities, and the rural regions, which are highly connected to the maritime culture of the Bay. The subregion is known for its crab and its Old Bay seasoning. DC specifically has a culture surrounding the running of the country, with many people working for the government and legislators. The economy of the subregion has a massive base of government and military. Much of this is concentrated in DC, but Norfolk, Virginia also holds the largest naval base in the world. Shipping is also a large industry, with the Port of Baltimore and Port of Virginia being some of the busiest on the East Coast. Commercial fishing and seafood is also a large part of the economy, along with some agriculture in the rural regions. Also, with the capital and amazing beaches, tourism is important to the economy. The upland Northeast is the other majority rural area in the Northeast, along with northern New England. It includes northern Pennsylvania and much of upstate New York. The region is higher in elevation than much of the Northeast, with the northernmost extent of the Appalachians called the Allegheny Highlands and the Adirondack Mountains. The subregion has a population of 5,260,000 and an area of 52,120 miles squared, with a population density of 100.9, which is just above the natural average. The upland Northeast has a GDP of $375.4 billion and a GDP per capita of 71.36, which is the lowest of any Northeast subregion. This region is mostly rural, with much of its population concentrated in just a few urban areas. The natural landscape of this subregion is defined by its different mountain ranges. In the south are the Allegheny Highlands, which have been mostly deforested, but regions surrounding the Finger Lakes still have beautiful forests. There are many valleys and waterfalls in this region. In the lower regions surrounding the Adirondack Mountains, the eastern Great Lakes lowland forests thrive with a variety of trees and wildlife, such as black bears, coyotes, and moose. In the Adirondack Mountains themselves, the eastern forest boreal transition bioregion is found, which is also found in Canada, but nowhere else in the US. Some of the peaks in the Adirondacks even feature alpine climates, a rarity in the Northeast. Overall, the region has some of the most beautiful scenery found anywhere in the Northeast, with peaks, valleys, forests, and waterfalls. The largest urban area in the subregion is Albany, New York, with a population of 915,000. Albany is the capital of New York and has been an important transport hub because it is situated at the end of the Erie Canal, connecting it to trade from the Great Lakes. The other large urban area in the region is Scranton in northern Pennsylvania, with a population of 574,000. Scranton is known for being the setting of the show The Office, as well as being Joe Biden's hometown. Most of the subregion has German ancestry, with some regions having Irish, Italian, English, or even Polish heritage. Religiously, the region is split between Catholicism and Protestantism of many types. The upstate New York part of the subregion tries hard to distinguish itself from the massive metro area that seems to take all of its state's attention. The majority of the area of the subregion is taken up by hills or farms, giving it a more rural character than much of the Northeast. Historically, the largest sector of this subregion's economy was manufacturing, but it has decreased even though it is still important to the region. Recently, the region has been having a semiconductor boom, with over 100 billion being invested in semiconductor chip production in the region. Much of the area of the upland northeast is taken up by agriculture, specifically dairy, with a large amount of yogurt, sour cream, and cottage cheese being produced in the subregion. Winemaking is also important, especially around the Finger Lakes.